Unalive by Daylight can be a confusing game when it comes to how the ranking system actually works. Every player has a devotion level, a grade rank, and also prestige levels. However, none of these have anything to do with the players that the MMR or SBMM system is actually pairing you with. So in this video, I'm going to explain exactly how MMR is working behind the scenes using a mock-up of information from hackers, behavior themselves, and also info that has been data mined. Furthermore, I'll explain why there's pretty good evidence that the system was intentionally set up poorly as a shadow nerf to survive with friends. Alright, so let's start at the beginning and quickly talk about grade ranks because they are the most misleading feature for new players. On the 13th of each month, grades reset all the way back to Ash 4 for every player. You then have a month to rank back up to Iridescent 1, which is the highest rank in the game. The closer you get to Iridescent 1 for each role, survivor or killer, the more blood points you get as a bonus next time there's a grade reset. But again, this basically has nothing to do with your hidden MMR rating. As survivor, you can die every single match and still hit Iridescent grade 1, and at least for now, the same goes for killer if you're 2-hooking every survivor and then letting them go at the end of the game. Put simply, grades are basically an indicator of how much a player has played in the last month. So now let's move on to MMR. When a player first starts playing DBD, they are put into what is essentially a kiddie pool. The base MMR for these players is 650. After playing for a certain amount of time and seeing how the players perform, their MMR will be massively adjusted. For instance, if the survivor is escaping every match or the killer is killing all the survivors every match in the 650 MMR testing bracket, the game will recognize that and bump them straight up to somewhere between 900 to 1000 MMR. This is the point where the grind actually starts. For both killers and survivors, 20 MMR can be gained per match as a maximum. The system itself is very simplistic. Survivors gain MMR for escaping exclusively through the exit gate. Hatch is considered a draw, so no MMR gains or losses. As for killer, the more kills, the more MMR is gained. 0 to 1 kill is an MMR loss. A 2k is typically an MMR draw, and a 3 to 4k is an MMR gain. Two additional factors are the length of the match and the MMR of the opponent. If a match reaches 10 minutes, it has a bigger impact on MMR gain, and if the enemy team or player has a higher MMR rating and they lose, their MMR losses are higher and the lower MMR side gains more. Once reaching 1600 plus MMR, you enter the highest matchmaking bracket of MMR in the game, and this means a few different things. To start, the soft cap of MMR is 1900, which means players start gaining MMR at a significantly slower rate once passing this threshold. Most streamers and content creators for the game play around the 2000 to 2200 MMR rating, and the absolute best players in the game get up to around 2400 to 2500 MMR. Past that, a little under 3000 is the actual hard cap. It's impossible to go higher. Now keep in mind that every player from 1600 MMR up to the hard cap are all in the same matchmaking pool. However, DBD does have matchmaking ladders to try and keep match quality as high as possible, so let me give you an example. If let's say a 4-man survive with friends, to keep it simple, that all have 1600 MMR search for a match, and these are the other 4-man swifts as well as the killers who are currently searching for a match at the same time, the system won't just randomly assign matches. Of the currently queued players, it will try to find the most balanced matches between all of the currently queued players, meaning that the 1600 MMR swift is more likely to play against the 1600 MMR killer than the 2500 MMR killer. That said, if there are not enough players currently queuing up at one time, the matchmaking parameters will expand to a larger group of players outside of the normal MMR brackets. Since 1600 MMR is the highest bracket, it can only go lower, often sucking players up into MMR hell, where showers don't exist and any talk of grass is illegal. Also, once a player hits 1600 MMR, their MMR losses are protected, meaning they can lose more games without actually losing much MMR. I suppose this was done to keep players from deranking if they happen to have a few bad matches, but still belong in the high MMR bracket. Finally, according to data given to us by behavior, it seems that the 1600 MMR bracket consists of something close to 5% of the player base. And now up to this point, you might be thinking that the system sounds kinda decent. It's doing its job well, so what exactly is the problem? Well, there's a few. The system screws screws over solo queue players really bad, possibly by intention, it's massively exploitable by both sides, and lastly, it's incredibly unhealthy for DBD specifically. And we'll talk about all of that and more in detail throughout the rest of the video. So now that we've covered the basic concept of how MMR works, let's dive into killer specific MMR. Every killer you have has a different MMR rating. This is why when you queue into a match with a specific killer, you can't swap to another killer unless you cancel matchmaking. However, once you've reached 1600 MMR with about 2 to 3 killers, the game will automatically boost all of your other killers to 1200 MMR regardless if you've ever played them before or not. So that does make it difficult to learn new killers, especially ones that operate significantly different mechanically like Nurse or Huntress. Again though, killer is pretty straightforward when it comes to MMR, whether you hooked survivors 12 times, one hooked them each, or literally just let them all bleed to death on the ground, it's the same result and the same MMR gain. Now you could say that's not very healthy for the game, which I do agree, but as far as an MMR system is concerned, it's really the only viable system that can be implemented in DBD in its current form when it comes to killers. Alright, now we'll talk about Survivor MMR, where again the only factor when it comes to MMR gain is whether or not you escaped through an exit gate. It doesn't matter how much or how little your teammates did in a game, anyone who escapes through an exit gate gains MMR, and anyone who dies loses it. Now recently, as a result of a lot of complaints about this system, Behavior updated it to where if a survivor did a lot for their team but still died at the end, they don't lose as much MMR as they did before, but they still do lose MMR, which I have to be honest doesn't really make much sense to me, unless the system was intentionally designed to keep Swifts at higher MMR. So it's now time to put on your tinfoil hat, because this is completely conspiratorial on my part, but if you are designing an MMR system for Survivor and you want it to be effective in gauging survivor skill levels, you would not base it solely off of escapes, especially when you know that the vast majority of survivors play in solo queue. So the most logical explanation for this is that Behavior is fully aware that Swifts escape significantly more often than solo queue players. The larger the Swift, the more common the escapes. So it seems completely reasonable to say that the system was specifically designed to make Survive with Friends, or more specifically Good Survive with Friends, play against the sweatiest killers. But now enters a large problem, because we know that the vast majority of solo queue players will never be able to reach the same level of consistent escapes no matter how well they play. So now you are left with an MMR system that at the top and under MMR brackets are filled with killers who are expecting Swift level efficiency in every match they play. Pair that with the fact that players can get to top MMR simply by hiding every match with Sole Survivor and Wake Up, then you start to see the holes forming in why solo queue players don't believe MMR actually exists. How can MMR possibly be real if your teammates have such widely different consistency and skill? Well, in the same way a player can boost their MMR by hiding in a bush, good survivors can lower their MMR by just not escaping through an exit gate. The system is very exploitable, and players have rational reasons for both lowering and raising their MMR levels. Good survivors want matches where they don't have to rely on their teammates, and bad survivors want matches where their teammates will carry them. Now, don't get me wrong, it is 100% possible for solo queue players to get their MMR up to around the 2000 to 2100 MMR range and have really good teammates. At this MMR level for Survivor, you're either filling in for a Swift or you have really good other solo queue players on your team. However, this is an extreme minority of players, and even a somewhat small run of bad games at this MMR could potentially kick solo queue players back down below the soft cap, resulting in even more awful matches. All in all, it's a very bad system for solo queue players, and the old PIP system did a much better job for a number of different reasons. So now let's talk about why SBMM in Dead by Daylight is a failure. Put simply, it massively increased the competitive mindset of the game by twisting player psychology into thinking every match they're about to play is going to be the sweatiest match they have ever played in their life, which unfortunately is largely reinforced by the match they're about to play. In the old PIP system, when a player got to Red Rank 1, the top rank at the time, they were in a pretty large pool of all other Red Rank players. Now, of course, you could run into sweaty teams or killers running full meta, and it was almost as annoying as it is now. But then you would get through the match knowing that most likely your next match wasn't going to be a sweaty one. But with MMR, every match plays like a competitive match until it doesn't. Yet at that point, it's basically too late. Let's say a killer comes into a match expecting sweat, they're running the best perks, map offering, add-ons, etc. Then 2 minutes into the match, they have already obliterated the survivors. Now personally, I ease off the gas in these situations because I realize, hey, this is the game I like to play. But the majority of killers I play against in solo queue do not do this, at least in EU servers. So you could feel free to blame the players for that, but honestly, it's behavior's fault for implementing SBMM in a game that not only is atrociously balanced at a fundamental level, but is the most fun when players aren't taking it so seriously. MMR is basically a betrayal of what makes the game good. But that's about it. If there's any questions you have about MMR in DBD, feel free to ask in the comments. I'll do my best to help you out. And also let me know, after over a year of having SBMM in DBD, do you all think it has made the game better or worse? Let me know. And as always, thanks for watching and have a good one.